The moment Winter jumped out of the building, his body switched with Violet. Violet thinks her body feels different. Then she gets up and touched her face and realizes she is in Winter's body. She thought, I switched bodies with Winter. I simply went to bed like I always do, so how did this happen? Did I die in my sleep? While she was trying to figure out what is happening, then suddenly door open and Hyle barge in the room. He shouts, President, you're awake. You really had me scared. You fainted so suddenly. This is exactly why I've been telling you to rest. You're lucky that the guards found you. What were you doing outside the walls? What if some bad guys had kidnapped you? I don't care if you beat me up. I have to get this off of my chest. Please take a proper rest. For at least a month. Please. Violet then spoke. Hyle, look here, I see that you care about Winter so much. I hope he understands that someday. Hearing this, Hyle gasped the situation and his eyes sparkled, knowing it was not Winter, it was Violet. Then, Violet get up and changed. She asked, so you found my husband unconscious just outside the walls? Hyle replied positively. Then Violet tried to figure out what really happened. She thought, I wonder why he went there. Could our bodies have switched because of Winter? That would mean that the person who died was Winter. No, that can't be. He might have just found another way to switch our bodies. Winter would never kill himself. Then she spoke, I must go find my husband first. As you know, we can only return to our own bodies by physical contact. Hyle tried to stop Violet and spoke, Madam Violet, please wait. While you're here, would you be able to fulfill a few duties that the president has fallen behind on? She didn't understand what Hyle is trying to say. Then he shows her all the pending work left by Winter. He spoke, first, it would be very much appreciated if you attended a meeting in his place. The president hasn't been attending recently, so the meeting has been put on an indefinite hold. And if you could also look over a few documents, that would be great. The president tends to just sign any documents these days without even taking a proper look at them. Violet is frightened. She is unable to understand why Winter, who loves working, have left this all work pending. She spoke, that isn't how a president of a company should be behaving. Hyle replied, that's what I'm saying. You're totally right about that. As I've said before, ever since the president has been acting troubled, the company has been in danger. Hearing Hyle's words, Violet is shocked. She thought, is Winter's company really in danger? His empire seemed like it would never fall. But all because of Winter. Then suddenly a knock on the door. A voice came. Excuse me, President, Anjali spoke. Hyle asked, Vice President, is there a problem? The president isn't in his best condition right now. Violet stopped Hyle, and spoke. It's all right, speak what you want. While Violet is handling the situation, Hyle thought, as expected of Madam Violet. She's so quick at adjusting to the situation at hand. Anjali hand over Violet, his resignation. He spoke, this is my letter of resignation. I have come to tell you that I will be resigning. Hyle thought, no, I'm sure this is just a warning. He's only doing this out of spite. Because of what the president did last time. I'm pretty sure that this letter is only a warning for the president to reflect on his action. Violet took his letter and spoke, all right, and thank you for all the work you've done. Hearing this, Anjali is frozen and Hyle panicked, thinking, no, Madam Violet, that's not what you should be saying. If the vice president quits in this situation, our company is completely done for. Violet noticed how Anjali is trembling from fear of losing his job. And Hyle gave a signal to Violet not to accept it. Then Violet spoke, I hope you continue to contribute your hard work toward our company. Please take this back. Finally Hyle, who was panicking, he sighed. Anjali replied, as I've said before, I can't keep working like this. If we only continue to expand, how do you plan on dealing with the aftermath? I refuse to go down with the company. Therefore, I'll be resigning. Violet stood up and then spoke. I apologize for not lending an ear to your words earlier. I would like you to put your trust in me one more time and continue working with me. How bad is the current situation? Anjali is dazed. Violet, who was in Winter body, continued. There are documents that describe our current standing. Although you'll probably put it off until later like you always do. I'll take a look right now. Please bring them to me. Anjali is stunned, then he snapped out and gave Violet documents. And spoke, okay then. You can start with these. Violet replied, I see. It'll take me a while to look through all of this. Please take back your resignation letter and sit here. You probably know these documents better than I do. Anjali was confused. He replied, ah, yes sir. Anjali is too stunned, he thought. This unusual sense of leadership. If it was like normal, he would have grabbed me by the collar. He seems like a completely different person. Hyel, who was about to leave the room, thought. Thank goodness. Thanks to their bodies switching, it seems that our company will be able to avert this crisis. We really would have been in trouble if the vice president had resigned. Then he left the room. Meanwhile, in Violet House, Winter opened his eyes and stared at an unfamiliar ceiling. He'd thought he'd died, but he hadn't. He'd never realized before now what a terrible punishment it was. Violet, are you ill? Pim and other villagers came to see Violet. He didn't have the energy to respond. Yet another person had invaded his space. Before Pim came, her daughter already came, Violet. The child said the name loudly and crawled atop the bed. She fell onto her knees and felt her forehead, then Winter's in turn. Are you ill? I'll bring my mommy. Just wait. Winter remained silent. Pim placed her hand on Winter's forehead like the child had done and said in surprise, you're running a fever. He'd been the one who jumped from the window. Why did she have a fever? Winter had noticed it the moment he'd opened his eyes. Winter considered whether to tell her to get lost, but thought better of it and lay down. Violet wouldn't say such a thing. The woman seemed distraught as she left the room. Winter was hoping he'd finally get some peace when a whole crowd rushed into the room moments later. Pim said, Violet is ill. Oh, she's a weak one all right. Other lady said, it's a miracle she only got sick now. She's such a kind soul. If she can't even say hello, how terribly ill she must be. Winter pretended to be asleep. He couldn't begin to fathom why all these villagers were coming to see him. What kind of life was Violet living here? Pim said, I brought soup. Another one said, oh, I brought some too. Let her eat as much as she can. Ah, it's because my children always come and bother her. My children did, too. Ever since he'd come into some money, Winter had lived a solitary life, on high floors and in deeper rooms. He was used to quiet, so the chattering around him irritated him to no end, and his sheets seemed to be growing heavier. Was it his imagination? Winter frowned, and the villagers must have realized the noise they were making bothered him. They slowly filtered out of the room. Winter opened his eyes once he was certain everyone had left. He pitched a string of curses at the layers of blankets that had been piled on top of him. There were many types of soup on the table in addition to some bread. The villagers must have known Violet liked flowers. This whole village is insane, said Winter with a scowl. He sat up. Rage had replaced depression. He stared at the soup bowls and fumed. They barge into the house and feed me food from who knows where. And what's with all the kids? And where did they get all these weeds? What is this? A dump? A street market? Winter shouted at the top of his lungs. He'd lived with irritation and depression for the past year. He hadn't given free rein to his rage like this in a long while. He noticed that he was beginning to feel cold. He wrapped one of the villagers' blankets around him. When he saw Violet's face in the mirror, Winter stood as if in a trance and walked towards it. He stretched his hand out and touched the face in the mirror. He noticed her eyes looked much more at ease. She should be thankful she is this beautiful, he grumbled. The house wasn't big, but there were almost no items laid out and it felt very clean. It was surprising how neat she'd grown in the course of a year. The real truth became apparent when he opened one of her drawers. She hasn't grown neater. She just doesn't have much of anything. I should have expected this. If Violet knew, she might resent it. She might wonder if he'd died near where she lived so Violet would notice. He hadn't been able to die after she left because he didn't want to make her feel guilty that her departure was the cause of his death. The thought that Violet considered him someone who brought her misfortune had spread instantly through his body like a deep venom. And yet death had evaded him. How much more terrible could this get? Violet had been in the same state as he was now back when she'd come to him and told him about how she'd considered death. I've not done right by her. He'd simply told her not to complain. If somebody said that to him now, he'd fall apart, break into 1,000 pieces. The thought that he'd said something like that to wife was driving him crazy. He heard a door open. It was Violet returning home. She walked towards him slowly. Violet spoke. Are you ill? Winter replied. I don't remember being ill. Violet bent down and touched his forehead. Before she could even register the heat, their bodies switched again and Winter could feel the slight fever on her skin. You are ill, he spoke. Not at all, Violet replied. Violet asked, how would you know? He replied, I was in that body just moments ago, Winter said in an exasperated voice. Violet got off the bed. Violet inquires, what happened? Why were our bodies switched? And what's this about you being found passed out under the castle wall? He spoke, we haven't met in a while, and you don't even greet me. Violet asked, this is more important. Explain. Winter thought it fascinating. Her eyes had changed from the ones he'd seen in the mirror. Now that her body was occupied by the rightful owner, their gaze was much more powerful. He thought they seemed to hold starlight gathered from the night sky. Though he'd felt nothing in the past year, the moment he met her the slightest fever bothered him. He saw a frown imbued with worry and anger, and each word she spoke seemed to shift the world on its axis. If he was personal hell, he decided he needed to disappear from the face of the earth. He had to find a way. Winter flattened his lips slightly. I visited the conic homeland and found an herb that facilitates the body shift. I tried taking some and it took effect immediately. I didn't think it would happen so quickly. She said, is that what happened? Winter spoke, what? Did you think I'd died or something? With so much to lose. Violet believed Winter was telling the truth, but her emotions had run away from her and her eyes moistened with tears. Winter frowned as deeply as he could manage, afraid she would cry. Winter spoke, I'm not the weakling that you are. I don't die. Besides, I'm filthy rich. What would I lack that I would wish to die? Winter asked, so how have you been? It hasn't been easy, but it's fun living here, Violet replied. Winter folded his arms and spoke, fun. What fun? This house looks like it's going to collapse any second now, and give me some refreshments. Violet went to brew some tea for Winter. While brewing tea she spoke, I thought we no longer had any business with each other. She gave a cup of tea to Winter and continued, please leave after you drink this. Winter replied, the harder you try to get me to leave, the longer I'll stay. If you didn't want me to find you, you should have hid somewhere I couldn't have found you. Violet replied, I didn't know our body will switch. Winter took sip of tea, and smiled, but Violet doesn't have pleasant expression. Then she spoke, actually it may be a good thing that you're here. We do have some unfinished business to take care of, please grant me divorce. We're no longer a married couple anyway, but in our current situation, neither of us are able to meet new people. Why won't you divorce me? Hearing Violet's words Winter paused, then he was about to say something, then suddenly village women came with a stew to give Violet. Watching this all commotion he spoke, is your house some kind of plaza? Why are all these people coming and going as they please? Violet replied, it's not your house, so don't meddle. Oh, so that's how it's going to be. He spoke then. Winter forcefully placed down his empty cup on the table, and continued, "We're still a married couple, I have the right to." Violet maintained one of the most frugal lifestyles in this village. Her husband, on the other hand, exuded extravagantly wealthy vibes. He had on an elegant suit tailored after the most recent trends using the best quality fabric and shoes that glistened with a neat sheen. In addition, he had intimidatingly good looks. They froze and looked at Violet, and she pushed them out the door. "Don't pay this any mind. He won't ever be back again," she said. The murmuring of the villagers only grew louder. One villager approached Violet and whispered, "I thought you had debt. How come he looks so rich?" They looked confused, and Violet saw she had no choice but explain. "Well, my parents borrowed a lot of money from my husband." "Gods, you're indebted to your husband." They could understand that. To think that such a frightening man had come to collect made them weak in the knees. Violet sighed and pushed the villagers away. "Please leave for now, everyone. You should be working." The villagers could see Violet was clearly being threatened, but being petite bourgeoisie themselves who lived on the small jobs House Yefimchuk paid them for, they found themselves powerless to tackle Winter. They stood there wondering if they should at least call the sailors over. It irritated Winter to no end that this precious time alone with his wife had been interrupted. Upon further thought, however, he realized that no good would come of antagonizing her neighbors. He belatedly forced a smile at the villagers, who looked at with trepidation. He spoke to one woman wearing an apron with a scarlet flower pattern. He spoke, "Judging from that apron, you must run a fruit shop." "Yes, that's right," Annis replied. "Is this enough to buy all the fruit in stock?" Winter took out a thick wad of Lockney bills and held it out to her. Annis, the owner of the fruit shop, took the bills in shock. She continued, "This is enough to buy all my stock and the next shipment that comes in next Tuesday." He replied, "I don't care about the details. Bring out all your fruit and have a party or something." Annis's eyes went wide. She'd been having financial difficulties of late. She gave a desperate look at Violet. Violet recalled how Winter tried to solve everything with money and sighed. She gestured to Annis to leave. Annis excitedly gestured to the villagers, "Let's have some fruit. The peaches are fabulous today." "Peaches?" Violet spoke. Annis replied, "You come to the village hall, too, Violet." People ran out buzzing with excitement. Winter's shoulders shook with laughter as he watched them leave. He turned to Violet, spoke, "The village hall." She could see the outline of the muscles covering his back through his shirt. Violet redirected her gaze from where it had involuntarily strayed. She looked at the door. The people in Chiron like to gather there whenever they have the chance. That would be unimaginable in Lackround. Everyone's so individualistic there. When everyone left and two of them were left alone, Winter spoke, "I should leave too." Violet replied, "Yes you should, you have a lot of work to do, and also please think about divorce." There's an obvious reason as to why Winter doesn't want divorce Violet. He wants Violet must be the one to inherit his fortune. A princess must live in a kingdom, and I must create that for her. That's exactly why I have written it in my will, that Violet will inherit everything. Now all I have to do is find a way to end my life. I know this isn't the right way to do things. However, it's the best thing that I can do for her." He was on the way to his hotel, but he can't stop thinking about Violet. He wants to stay Violet's side till his last breath. He came back. Violet was surprised. She asked, "You just went back, what happened, why are you back?" Winter stood there for a while. Violet sighed, and spoke, "If you don't have anything to say, please leave, I'd like to rest." Then Winter spoke, "I will sign divorce papers but give me a 3 months cooling off period." Then they both went inside. Violet asked, "What do you mean by cooling off period?" He blinked slowly, as if stretching out time, and then answered, "Let's get divorced. Do you know that my assets are one by one?" "No, do you think your family and my family would accept divorce so easily? We just signed one document without permission." Violet looked at him with her mouth tightly closed. Then Violet spoke. Are you lonely? Do you even need a place to sleep? Violet's cold words poured into Winter's heart like thousands of needles. Winter spoke with an expressionless face, as if all her emotions had cooled and evaporated. Did I say something wrong? And if you want to swear, do it. Because it's written all over your face. That was all Winter thought about all day. She doesn't have the confidence to vent her anger, and money doesn't work for her. If I die, how is that any different from divorce anyway? Moreover, for Violet, a member of the Lawrence family, the pinnacle of conservatism, it was natural that widowhood would be better for her than divorce. He spoke in a somewhat broken voice. Ordinary couples take 3 months to consider before getting a divorce. That's natural. This period of reflection will actually make our divorce easier. Because it will be proof that no matter how hard you try, it's not worth it. 3 months. After that, I'll sign as many divorce papers as you want. He spoke. Violet opened her mouth and spoke. There are conditions. Condition, he repeated. Seeing the conditions come out, it seemed like the story was going well, so the corners of Winter's mouth, which had been dark the whole time, slightly light up. However, Violet had always been an incomparably noble princess to Winter, so even I couldn't guarantee that those words would never come out. Winter said in an uncertain tone. I try hard, but I just ignore things that come out of nowhere. Because you are so princess-like and have military responsibilities. She thought, then response, I will do. There was a 3-month deadline. Winter looked happy at the harvest beyond her imagination, and Violet also spoke with a somewhat satisfied expression. After that day, I'm really done with you. He replied, yes. She continued, I guess we won't have to meet again in the future. Even if you want to meet me, I won't meet you. Violet paused for a moment at his words and then nodded. The two sat, and facing each other at a round table covered with a spring-like light yellow tablecloth, and briefly wrote on their discussion on paper. The marriage was also an arranged marriage, but this time it was a period of deliberation with the details of the contract being discussed. He thought, it seemed like it would take 3 months until I found a way to die. So I decided, 3 months. About 100 days. Winter was sitting across from her with her chin resting on one hand, looking at Violet with a happy face as she signed the contract. It made me feel better to think that I had 3 months to legally see her before I died. She gets what she wants and what I want. He can give her everything he has, and for her, it will be a contract in which he will disappears. He then spoke. I have a question. Say it, she said. When Violet gave graceful permission, lifting her chin slightly as always, Winter opened his mouth. Anyway, the consideration period means trying to avoid divorce as much as possible. Shouldn't we decide on a method of effort? So, she asked. He continued, let's write down the exact number of times we meet. Oh, and a kiss too. When the kiss was mentioned, Violet wondered if Winter might feel that her runaway was just a 1-year business trip. She said, I'll give you someone to talk to. He cut off her words and said, you won't have anyone to talk to. She continued, are you going to listen to me say things like, I hate you, you're rude, get out of my house, for 3 months, and then just file for divorce? He replied, yes. 3 times. Winter spread 3 fingers. Let's just do it 3 times. Kiss. Violet hesitated. Her kisses with him were always so sweet that even the back of her neck felt tingly. She planned to finalize her relationship with Winter here. Therefore, her sweetness may become a trap that keeps her in that hell again. But after a year, the complicated feelings she had for Winter were probably diluted, and 3 kisses wouldn't have shaken her firm decision to divorce. Rather, it may be an opportunity to check how much her feelings about him have been resolved. After gathering her thoughts for a while, Violet opened her mouth. Okay, 3 times. He continued, good. By the way, it's okay whenever you want. Violet was slightly flustered by Winter's teasing words. Winter was so happy to see that angry face after a long time that she even laughed without realizing it. It's been so long that I felt awkward laughing like that, Winter said, rolling his eyes, and the rest of the skinship will be as cooperative as possible. She asks, exactly what the rest is. He said, handshakes and hugs. She told him, I will allow it. Once the contract was completed, Winter took one copy and Violet placed the other under the bed. Winter said mischievously as she looked at Violet, who had returned after carefully hiding the contract. She asked, is the contract going into effect right now? He replied, yes. As soon as she could answer, Winter hugged Violet's waist with one arm. Surprised, Violet took a sharp breath. She raised her hands defensively and placed them between her body and Winter's. As Winter approached, her waist fell behind her, flexing as she dodged. Winter laughed, and said, do you think you're flexible because you do ballet? She replied, so suddenly. He smirked and said, isn't it better to do it right away? As Violet kept trying to avoid it, Winter tickled her belly button with his other hand. This surprised Violet and straightened her back. In an instant, the two people's faces became closer. He spoke, do you get tickled a lot? She was embarrassed and asked, gee, what did you do now? He replied, something naughty. She blushes and replies, that's not what I asked. Violet mind can't think straight. Why is he stalling before our kiss? I can smell his cologne. And the faint scent of aftershave and cigarettes. Winter doesn't have any particular body odor. But when several scents combine, it becomes the scent of winter blooming. And whenever I catch a whiff, my heart starts to beat uncontrollably. They both were so close that Violet thought he might kiss her, but suddenly Winter paused and spoke, on second thought, it might be better to save it for later. Ah, by the way, you're allowed to kiss me whenever you wish to. Violet's face was flustered. She said, that's very sly of you. Seeing Violet's face, Winter smiled and enjoyed his teasing. She continued, if you're done now, please leave. Winter can't believe, he never thought that he would ever miss that face she makes when she scolds him. He turned around and spoke. You don't have to kick me out like that. I was already going to leave. Either way, we'll meet again soon. Next day, Hyle went to someone's house according to Winter's instruction. Winter, Hyle, about that person you sent to look after Violet. Hyle's response, yes. I actually received a report from them a few minutes ago. They told me how Madame Violet was doing. Winter continued, yeah, that person. Go over to their place tomorrow morning. And tell them to bring Violet here. As Winter instructed, Hyle came. The homeowner asks, why you came here? I've told you everything that you wanted to hear yesterday. Hyle replied, I came because our president actually had a request for you. Could you bring Madame Violet to the Connie's company by this afternoon? Miss Phim and her daughter who was behind her mother was ready to help. The next day, Pim came with Lena and spoke harshly to Violet. It's not just our house, Violet. While Violet was removing the cloth covering the plate, Pim spoke. Anyway, let's go talk together. I heard about ham and compensation, and the construction is noisy. Violet said, Pim, you were busy, so it's okay if I go alone. Pim continued, how far is it from the hotel? Besides, Violet can't ask for something like that. I have to do it for you. Violet made an embarrassed expression. That wasn't the reason at all, but there was no easy way to explain it. Eventually, she left the house, guided by Pim's power. The whole way she was thinking of a way out, and it wasn't until she was almost there that she remembered to pretend to be sick. When I came, I was in front of the hotel building. As I went inside, one of the employees who had been working neatly walked up. What's going on? Pim said in response to the employee's question. Why was it sent as compensation? This person was the only one in my village who didn't get it. I wonder if it's missing. The employee replied, I see. We will take care of it soon. I had to say no and say it was okay, but the timing wasn't right. Finally, as the staff began to walk along the lobby, Pim's eyes widened. The three people, including the child, were led by an employee into an empty reception room. When the simple snacks came out first, Lena looked around and asked her Violet. Violet, what's this? Then Violet leaned down, made eye contact with Lena, and said, chocolate. Try it. When Violet tore open a small portion of the package and held out a piece, Lena bravely took the whole thing in one bite and her eyes widened. Delicious. Quote. Then Pim next to me spoke curiously. That's chocolate. It's my first time seeing it too. Violet replied, is that so? Oh, it must be a bit expensive. Even the ham that was sent as part of the compensation package is too luxurious. I don't even know how they got their hands on such high-quality ham. Violet thought, I wrote in my contract not to send expensive gifts, but I was sending gifts to people all over the neighborhood. Anyway, he was a man who could never let his guard down. As Pim shook his head, the door burst open and Winter came in. Violet looked embarrassed even though she had expected him to appear, but Winter had no qualms. He was the kind of person who would intervene wherever I wanted to. Lena was scared and grabbed Pim's arm tightly. Mom, he's the scary guy who married Violet. Oh my, why are you here? Pim spoke and glanced towards Violet. Violet explained with a somewhat resentful expression. It's my husband, but we are in the middle of divorce mediation. So, he has nothing to do with me. That's right. Winter responded calmly, then he burst into laughter at the same time, regardless of the situation. Soon Winter cleared his throat and spoke to Pim and Lena. Are you two going back? I will prepare a carriage for you. Wait, I need to take Violet too. I can't leave her with her soon-to-be ex-husband. As Pim spoke firmly, he opened his mouth and said, either way. By the way, did you hear that from Violet? If you know she is la-crowned precious. At that moment, Violet shouts. I guess we have a lot to talk about. I'm sorry I came with you, Pim. Do you want to go first? But Lena said she will not leave without Violet. Then Winter continued, kid, if it tastes good, I'll give you more snacks. So stop bothering Violet now. Lena ran in excitement, and said, I need to give some to Ranaz and Karano and Henna too. Winter said, yes, take enough to share with your little friends. Fim turned and said to Violet, then I will be heading out first then. While the Fim was leaving Winter in Fim ears. Have you had a chance to ask her about remarriage yet? She replied softly, yes, I did on our way here. She said that it probably won't be easy for her to remarry. She expects that her brother will be heavily involved in that matter. Winter replied, I see. He thought, once we divorce, I'm sure that Ash will try to use Violet to his advantage once again. After all, that's what he did when we got married. Violet may say that our marriage was entirely her decision. But I'm sure she was put in a situation that made it hard for her to reject the idea. Sometimes I wonder what her 18-year-old self was thinking when she agreed to marry someone who simply wanted her for her title. He then spoke about the compensation for the construction noise. It was actually just an excuse to get you to meet me. I have something to say to you today, so I figured I would come here if I did this, so I thought about it. What do you mean? As Violet asked, Winter walked towards her and knelt in front of her. Violet's eyes showed embarrassment at his actions. Winter said, sorry, I feel like I need to say this. Violet unconsciously clenched the hem of her skirt. What are you sorry about, all of a sudden? He continued, you were right. You did that, right? I bought it at a high price, but it seems like I can't use it. I didn't understand it at the time. My marriage to you was ultimately about me paying money to buy a title, and you had to sacrifice yourself for that. I didn't want to admit it. I apologize. Violet looked into Winter's eyes as he looked up at her. It was a feeling that was difficult to describe. Thank you for saying that. How much? Do you want to at least pat my head? When Winter asked mischievously, as if she was done with being serious. Violet unconsciously said, "Ah." Then she laughed as if Winter was shocked and spoke, "You make all those noises." She replied, "I learned it from Pim who came with me earlier." He said, "You learned something great." She continued, "I also learned how to be sarcastic from you." He said, "Oh, is that so?" Violet then smiled, ever so slightly, and said, "I'm sorry too." Winter replied, "If it's about losing money, that's fine. It wasn't your fault, but you apologized 100 times. If it was an apology for leaving, that would be fine. Because I will never forgive you." She said, "Then let's cancel." "That's wise," Winter said. Although it took a long time, his apology softened their relationship considerably. And Violet guessed that Winter wasn't just ignoring the past year. Violet got up and pulled Winter's arm and he got up. Then he pretended to stumble and hugged his wife with one arm. He buried his face in Violet's shoulder and muttered, "My legs are numb and I can't stand." "You are standing now. I don't feel any weight at all." "Shit," Winter grumbled and straightened up. Maybe it was because he relaxed a little after receiving the apology, but I found him a little cute. Violet asked, "Why do you want to hug me like this?" He said, "Your body is perfect for hugging." Violet thought that Winter might have been seeing someone else over the past year. But seeing as he was hugging her, I guess not now. He asked if that was your idea of gifting olive oil. Violet replied, "Yes it was." "But how did you know that?" He continued, "There's no one in this rusty old town who knows me like that." Violet frowned and said, "Don't call it a rusty old town." He continued, "You should be thankful that you're so beautiful. Especially with that uptight personality of yours." Hearing Winter's words, Violet paused and stared at him blankly. He didn't get why she is making such an expression. Then he spoke, "Why are you looking at me like that? Don't tell me. You don't realize how beautiful you are." She replied, "It's the first time I've heard you say that." Winter asked, "Have I never told you that you're beautiful?" She nodded. With a gloomy expression he said, "Should I get on my knees again?" She said, "No, that's enough." He continued, "Seems like I ruined the mood again. I was hoping this conversation would naturally lead me to asking you out on a date." "A date?" she repeated. "I heard there was going to be a festival next week. I know you're not the kind of person to ask me out on a date, so I was going to ask you instead." She thought of a date. "I didn't think we'd ever go on one again." But he did apologize. "And I should cooperate as much as I can, just until our cooling off period is over." She said, "All right, I will accept your request for a date." She looked at Winter and think, maybe my heart has become little softened. It almost feel as Winter looks so adorable at this moment. Winter strokes his hair and blush. Well, our manhwa ends here. If you are interested in hearing, then continue, otherwise skip. So we all are curious. Why does Violet love Winter so dearly? The reason, her brother who died in a young age. He was always nice to Violet and always takes Violet's side. He wasn't a strong child, but he always gave Violet strength to keep going on. But after his death her life crumbles. She felt so helpless that she can't take her own decisions and has to give up on everything for her brother Ash. When she heard about how Winter Blooming is so successful, beside being an illegitimate child he works so hard, that whole empire feared him, she always had a liking for such a strong, sensible, and hard-working person. That's why Violet truly believes that Winter is her first and only true love. If you want another episode, then type Princess Violet is an angel. Till then, bye guys.